welcome to Boston Public Schools Digital Learning Team's broadcast through our Google Hangouts on Air. We're broadcasting from the Bowling Building over in Dudley Square, our new home for the school department headquarters. And I'm really happy to be here talking today to the Boston Public Schools community about digital learning and Common Core and how technology integration really does have a place in the Common Core state standards. And we're going to look at how professional development might play a key role in helping our students and our teachers achieve success in the Common Core state standards, particularly just really addressing the rigors of the curriculum and content that we're looking at through Common Core. I'm here with three panelists today. I'm really happy to have our three panelists on board. First, I'd like to introduce Natasha Scott. Natasha, you can say hi. And Natasha is the Assistant Director for Social Studies and History in Boston. And she brings a lot of wealth right from the classroom, and she's done a lot already. She'll have a chance to speak to us in just a moment. Welcome, Natasha.
Happy to be here.
Great. And we have Liz Holman, who's usually my partner in leading and moderating the Google Hangouts on Air. Liz comes from the University of Michigan. She's on the panel today because she's just done her study, her PhD dissertation on technology, networking, and professional development and the importance of networking. And Liz will have a chance to talk more about that. So thank you, Liz, and welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here as a panelist today instead of a moderator.
Funny to see you on the other side of things here today, Liz. And Brandon Slaughter is from the Office of Academics, and Brandon has joined us on last minute. He's a busy man. He's coming from another all-day leadership meeting. So Brandon, thank you so much for jumping in on our Hangout on Air to talk about your work and how it can impact professional development and Common Core. So welcome, Brandon. So I'm going to get started, folks, and I'm going to switch back to me, and I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes and just talk, to give us some talking points. I've put together a few slides. They're familiar to you. We've all been hearing about Common Core and our need for implementing Common Core across all subjects, well, mainly in English and in mathematics, but we're going to sort of look at it from a different angle, and that is to sort of look at it how Common Core is embedded, or how technology is really embedded in Common Core. So technology integration and curriculum is really our topic today. The standards of Common Core really lay out a vision, a very broad vision of what it means to be a 21st century literate person. And it's kind of a nice big picture vision that the standards have put out, because what we're looking at is a student that has critical thinking skills, problem solving, those analytical skills needed to be successful in college and career. We've been hearing about these standards, these important skills. They're not new to teachers, they're not new to educators, but we do know that there's a great demand for a success in college and career to have these sort of independent thinking skills, these collaborative skills that students need, and the ability to sort of analyze and problem solve. So Common Core is really a roadmap to helping students achieve these skills of independence and academic skills. What I find most appealing about the Common Core standards as an educator is that they're embedded in real-world relevance, and that is that they have, it's easy to apply real-world situations, data collecting for student work. They emphasize higher-order thinking skills. A lot of talk about rigor in the English language arts and in the math curriculum around Common Core. They're research and problem-solving based, and those skills are all very much tied into what we in the OIAT department are trying to promote and help establish, and that is the sort of 21st century skills of using digital literacies to cite sources, to be involved in in-depth research on the internet and elsewhere. So that's how we're sort of weaving in the technology and media literacy skills throughout the Common Core. We're going to just take a quick look at some of the things that are going on in Common Core in relation to technology and the big shifts. So you've all been a part of the big shift conversation in ELA especially, and that is building knowledge through rich nonfiction and informational texts. To look at complexities in text and vocabulary building. So there's lots of usefulness when we talk about technology and helping students work their way through these complexities and rigorous academics. And reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence. So argumentative writing, presentation, communications across multi-modes of learning, blogs, papers, newsletters, being able to write and communicate in many different forums is part of the shifts in ELA. We also know that writing is a huge component in digital literacy in the Common Core, and I hope that our panelists can sort of speak about how writing is embedded in things across content and in the sort of the stepping stones or the ladders from grade to grade and the different types of expectations that are embedded in Common Core in relation to writing. And just to look a little bit closer, we have also reading, writing tasks in the 8th, 10th, and 12th grade here. It sort of talks about embedding the technology skills that will help students achieve this type of broad-based writing and all-encompassing skills that they'll need to be successful across many modes of writing. And you can see the Google logos over there, all the Google apps that we have in Boston as a Google Apps for Education district to help achieve those writing goals. Just an example of a very specific standard in the writing standard, using analysis and supporting claims and analysis of topics. Very, very good, very detail-oriented, very evidence-based citations of work in writing arguments. And here we have sort of the span of reading and informational texts that are in each grade or in the selected grades 8, 9, and 12, just an example. And this gives sort of information on how technology can be embedded in it, how to use evaluating sources from many different modes, evaluating information from many different sources, being able to cite those sources, creating strong contextual evidence throughout the standards and throughout their writing and reading. So these are just some of the basic standards that you're all aware of out there, that Common Core is on the minds of all of us in Boston Public Schools and across the country. But to try to combine it with a technology integration perspective, I'm sharing this slide here, which is a diagram of facilitative versus integrative digital pedagogies. And we talk about the roles of teachers and the role of teaching in general, how the shifts in Common Core really bring to light the need for a new way of looking at the role of teacher and the type of technology or digital literacies that we are sharing with our students. We know that on the left side of there, we facilitate learning by sort of the teacher at the center of the room, the teacher at the center of the stage as a disseminator of knowledge, and learning is sort of a piecemeal transactional process. Whereas an integrative approach might look at the teacher as a co-learner, someone who is sitting side by side with the students, working through problems, bringing experiences to the classroom and then using them as learning material. Literacies are primarily multiple, unstable, changing, and trial by error, and the teacher plays that role of coach and facilitator of learning. In terms of enacting classroom digital practices, technology is often looked at as a separate learning tool, as something you have to learn on its own, whereas in the enacted classroom digital practices, technology is a way to help us achieve curriculum goals, to learn specific things, whether it's history, math, English, science, that we are using technology to achieve curriculum standards, not for the sake of learning the tool, but to learn the pedagogies and the content in Common Core. So technology has a place in the role of helping us achieve content mastery, for helping students be prepared for college and career. So this standard here is just an example of using the internet. They're embedded throughout the Common Core state standards. And I'm going to end with this slide here before I engage with the panelists, that here at OIIT and the digital learning team, Liz actually has created this graphic which builds on the idea of we have to start somewhere with student technology skills and teacher technology skills as well. And that is that we use technology in a functional way to help do things. And our goal is to help use it in a strategic way, to start thinking about the why we use technology. What are we trying to achieve here, and how can technology help us achieve communications across platforms, being a responsible web citizen, and collaborating with peers across not just the school, but across the world, actually. We live in a global society where digital literacies give us the capacity to really connect, collaborate, and communicate with others. So we'll be referring back to this diagram, this graphic of functional and strategic digital literacies. So I am happy to sort of be here again from the bowling building, talking about high-quality professional development with our panelists. And I just want to sort of start with this quote here to sort of prompt the panelists and start thinking about what we need to do in Boston Public Schools to help facilitate this technology integration and Common Core state standards. We know that professional development is a huge conversation in Boston. We have limited number of hours for some schools. What is the best mode of professional development? Well, we know that this research study, this quote from the study, talks about high-quality PD, emphasizing the importance of exposing teachers to explicit models of how students learn within particular content areas so that instruction is informed by understanding of that learning it is intended to support. In other words, PD is contextualized to help us achieve the curriculum goals. With that in mind, I'd like to sort of talk to our panelists here about how professional development can help us achieve the goals of Common Core state standards. And I'd like to open it up to the panel, what sort of your vision is of Common Core and the work you're doing with teachers to help us meet those standards. So feel free to jump in.
So I'll jump in really quickly, and maybe somebody else will be able to piggyback off of me. One of the things that you brought up when you emailed us earlier in the day, Ed, was you asked the question, what do teachers need to be able to know and be able to do in order to implement the Common Core state standards in their classroom and also integrate technology. And I think when it comes to the Common Core, there are certainly standards that speak to technology. You had one of them up on the screen, the one that talks about using technology to conduct research or find sources online. And there are technology standards throughout the Common Core that speak to it specifically, but there are lots of standards in the Common Core too, like writing a narrative, where you could sort of reinvent a way that you've been doing this in the past, not using technology in the classroom, to address the standard and use technology anyway. And so I think sometimes we read the Common Core and we see standards that look a lot like standards we've had in the past. They don't say anything explicit about technology, but that doesn't mean you can't use technology to address that standard. So as an example, with the narrative one, I was having a conversation with an English teacher not long ago, and she said, you know, I have this curriculum and I have to teach narrative essays, and I have to teach students how to write and compose narratives. And I said, okay, well, sure, but does it have to be an essay? Does the curriculum specifically say that? Because you could engage your students with digital storytelling, and that's going to do the same thing as writing a narrative. Students will still need to write a narrative. They'll still need to write a story because they'll need to plan out and maybe even storyboard their digital story. They'll still need to have a narrative arc and a plot, and they'll still need to learn what those parts are. But they might need to also incorporate images and incorporate sound. They'll need to think about music. They'll need to put all of these things together. And so that's going to meet the narrative standard, but that's also going to meet a number of other writing standards and standards that like ISTE has articulated related to pulling multiple modes and media into what they're creating and doing some of those other digitally literate skills that are in that arc you showed that are up towards the top. And so I think it's important when teachers are thinking about some of these standards to think beyond the ones that speak specifically to technology and to look at the ones that don't and really think about how they can reinvent their practice to meet standards that don't say something about technology, but they can still use technology to meet those standards in innovative ways and to incorporate multiple modes and media into what they're doing with their students.
I would definitely agree with what Liz is saying, just because if we think about, so I'm going to share one of our core actions for the History and Social Studies department, and let me see if I can pull it up. And what we're doing is when we talk about sources and primary sources, we want to make sure that we're sharing, there we go, that we're focusing on not just a source being a text, but also a source being the maps, political cartoons, video footage, primary source documents. So getting teachers comfortable with different websites and different resources where they can go on and they can explore, integrate it within their classrooms, but also have it so that students can go on and explore the same materials within a technological platform. So we think about our maps. This is actually one of those ThingLinks. I'm not going to talk about ThingLink this time. So it's my favorite. So they can do maps. I'm actually going to show a different website. So for example, in social studies, they have geography skills when they're talking about wars and battles. So this is actually from the Leventhal Map Center. And here, students can go on and go down to the grain of the map, which you wouldn't see from the naked eye if they had just a printout copy. And here you can see the little soldiers that are on the map marching towards the battle that you can only see by using this platform from the Leventhal Map Center. So part of this is exposing our teachers to the kind of resources that are available out there, because some of it is just the awareness. So when we think about PD and how we can have teachers integrate this more often, it's starting with one simple website, one simple resource that they can go on and have their kids use in the classroom, and something that is comfortable to use. So that Leventhal Map Center, you can go down, see the grain of the map. The maps are organized by collection, so it makes it a lot more teacher-friendly and a lot more student-friendly. So it's a way to integrate technology, have kids, I'm always going to talk about social studies, have kids talk about social studies and engage with map skills and geography that they wouldn't necessarily get to.
Well, Natasha, to your point and to Liz's point too, Liz's point was to sort of look at where technology isn't embedded in the curriculum in state standard, and look at technology solutions. How can we engage students and teachers in learning how to use technology to achieve a certain standard? And you're talking about engaging teachers in a very interesting and fun website like an interactive map, and looking at the very detailed information that they might not be aware of. So just really getting teachers familiar with the resources and the tools that are out there to embellish, to enhance, to really help facilitate their love of using technology, not just as an added extra that they have to do, but something that really is engaging and facilitates their work in the classroom. That's excellent.
I would just quickly piggyback, in addition to the ELA and social studies standards, for example, the math standards. I was trying to dig up an example here, but maybe I can find it here in a quick second to show on my screen. But just even in terms of like showing, for example, proportions, our schools have just recently completed or are in the process of completing the PARC PBAs. And so one of the, I think, great things about technology is they allow us to really look at how we assess students in varied ways, really using the technology, being able to pull up not only, say, passages on the English side, but also even video to support them, for example, to Elizabeth's point, developing their say, narrative essays. So I think all of these components of technology really enhance not only the instructional aspects, but also our ability to kind of really assess the students' mastery of skills as we move through the year.
And to piggyback on that, it's not, and I'm sharing my screen here, Ed, I don't know if you want to show this. This was a resource that I wanted to show people in relation to digital storytelling. Kathy Schrock's Guide to Everything has a number of digital storytelling apps that you can use, classroom ideas, lesson plans, and then also if you're interested in digital storytelling, checking out the Center for Digital Storytelling's YouTube channel has a lot of examples, but it's not about, and what I wanted to emphasize here is it's not about the technology, it's about thinking about how whatever it is that you have done with students for a long time, whatever that practice is that you've done for a while, like writing narrative essays, what that looks like in the 21st century. So in the 21st century, what does it mean to tell a story? Do you always sit down and write one? Well, sometimes you do. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes you take out your phone and you record something, and then you go in and you edit it and you make it a funny meme or something and you share it out with people and it goes viral, right? So, and kids today don't think about that in academic ways and think about what the message is that they're sending unless prompted to do so. And so you can tie these things that they do on a regular basis that are part of how we tell stories in the 21st century, for example, or how we do and think about math in the 21st century, and you can tie it to their academic lives too in school and pull that in. And that's not only going to be more engaging, but it's going to help them see how what they're doing outside of school is linked to what they're thinking about and engaging with in school.
That's a great point, and I am sharing your screen there with the digital storytelling resources. I know that our team actually has a resource also in our Google Doc on some of these digital storytelling resources because, as Liz said, digital storytelling covers a lot of content areas, and it can really be used in a lot of ways. And it's at its best, it's a simple brainstorming session, a graphic organizer, and there's so many ways to engage students. But also, it's easy to do these days. But it also helps develop their voice and their confidence and their ability to sort of communicate across many modes. And that's really key in helping us help these students succeed. We all have great resources in mind when it comes to technology integration. You know, I might love Google. Someone else might love, some Apple products, and Brandon might have a whole wealth of online resources that are incredibly valuable. How do we help our teachers navigate the web and the vast amount of tools to help them hone their skills and to be more prepared? As Natasha said, sometimes we have to keep it simple. So what can professional development do to help make this transition to a new role of teacher as that facilitator, as that coach on the side, as that co-learner to be successful? What is it going to take for PD?
I think part of it is the modeling, the leading by example. So as a teacher going in, so for example, I had a group of teachers doing some curriculum writing, and they did some of the work on Google. They went in, they added comments to each other's work. So that basic practice that they were able to do, they're now more comfortable with Google. So for example, I'll show you my screen, since I am one of those Google fans. And so what they were able to do is, by a simple, insert a comment. So here's my Google Doc. So say I wanted to insert a comment on this T-chart. I could highlight, go insert comment, and there's a shortcut. But here, you can now collaborate. So what does it say? I wanted to wonder what the purpose was. You could have different people collaborating on one document. And you could use, as a teacher, as you practice and get more comfortable with this, you could use this for your planning. You could use this with collaborating with peers at grade level teams. You could use this in collaborating with people who are attending the same professional development session as you. So I think really what you have to do is that continual practice and getting familiar, and as we say in the classroom, model, model, model. Just like you want to model for your kids, you're modeling. Teachers need to model for each other. Facilitators, professional development facilitators need to model the exact same practice.
Mm-hmm. And Google is a good place to start, considering we're a Google Apps district, and we have a lot of people using and doing a lot of great things in Google. And Natasha, every time we talk about Google, we seem to emphasize the collaborative aspect of it, being able to work asynchronously with our peers or students with teachers or students with students. So that collegiality is what I'd like to talk about next. How do we develop that sort of collegiality and support systems at school, because there's not enough professional development providers to go to every school and to do this type of technology integration training. So what is the importance of sort of personal learning networks or collegiality or networks in helping us sort of achieve this professional development model where teachers are learning together and they are able to sort of hone in on the particular tools and skills that they need to be successful where they're working?
Yeah, I think part of it, and one of the things I think we've done a good job of as a district, is creating spaces for teachers to be able to kind of come together and even share these resources that might occur at a history PD or a math PD, but also even our technology department kind of facilitates even those discussions within, say, the district. I think at a school level, as a district, we've really been trying to strengthen our professional learning cycles. And I think all schools are really working to kind of combine those, integrate those obviously with data cycles, and really cultivate an environment in their schools where not only professional learning around instruction, but around digital literacy can exist. So I think as we, as a district move forward, I think part of our work will continue to be to support school leaders, particularly when they are brought together at a district level, and also the individuals of our curricular departments as we're going out to support our schools as they continue to develop these cycles and best strategies of instruction.
And I would agree with both what Natasha said a second ago about modeling, and I would argue that this is really difficult. Creating a space where people feel comfortable asking questions about technology, where they feel comfortable admitting what they don't know about technology, that can be really difficult because I think technology, more than some other things, can be very intimidating. People are content area experts. They have degrees and master's degrees in education. They know what they're talking about when they talk about instruction, but technology is so new and it changes so fast that it can be really difficult to create a space in a school that is supportive of where people are at that moment, and that helps build their skills from where they are without making people feel like they're going to be judged if they have to ask a question, or making people feel like if they ask a question it's going to be a stupid question. And I don't want to downplay the difficulty of that by saying that there's a solution. There's one solution, because there's not. I think it's contextually based. I think it depends on the space. It depends on the school leadership. It depends on how the school leadership has built a culture around digital learning at that school, both for students and for teachers. There are studies that are coming out that talk about how to do this well. I think professional learning communities within schools are one great way to start that process. I think developing inquiry-based cultures in schools where teachers do research and they try new things in their classroom and that innovation is supported is key. So a space where teachers are invited and encouraged to try something new and to have their colleagues come in and watch them try something new, and where they feel comfortable doing that in front of their colleagues is key. But that requires a lot of support. That requires a lot of infrastructural support and a lot of time within a school to co-plan, to create space for teachers to watch one another, and to be outside the classroom for that. And so I think, we're getting there. There are schools that do a lot of this work and that do it really well, but then there are also a lot of places where we need to work on things, and we need to sort of put ourselves in the space of being teacher as co-learner on the slide that you showed a little bit ago, Ed, where we don't know as well as we might wish we did what it is that's going to come next and going to transform our teaching and going to transform our schools. And we need to kind of be okay with that uncomfortable space of not knowing.
I think part of the jumping into the conversation, but also just jumping into the use of technology, I think that's something. In the beginning of the year, central office, we kind of had our running joke of Google tips. So 5-10 minutes of each meeting was just, here's a new Google tip. This is how you open a document. This is how you share a document. And those kind of basic things, those basic aspects, and I think being comfortable with being able to start with that base point. Like, not thinking that you have to start at being able to publish a Prezi online immediately, but that you can start from the basics, just creating a document, being able to manipulate that document, being able to collaborate on that one document, and starts to make the platform where it's okay, everyone's learning together. And I know I always say, whenever I learn something new, say, oh, I just learned this, I'm in love with it, but I just learned it, and then you just get comfortable playing with it. So I think it's just a matter of being able to take the risk and creating a comfortable environment for that risk.
And Brandon mentioned that comfortable environment, the spaces to share and stuff like that. And we know that many schools have informal coffee hours. We're going out to the Quincy Elementary School next week to do a PD, and we know that there's a lot going on at that school around technology because the teachers get together before school, have coffee, and they share things like that, Natasha. And it's a space where they can learn and say, I don't know how to do that, and they can share and make mistakes. And I know that when we do PD, we have to really allow time for teachers to play and for teachers to learn and make mistakes, and that's what we're expecting our students to do, to experiment, to work through problems, and then to become facilitators of their own learning. That's a great question. I'd like to just sort of continue on that conversation school leaders. And we have a lot of different populations in VPS. We have the network superintendents. We have a lot of groups in schools or that are visiting schools and trying to help provide remedies for certain issues and challenges that schools are facing. Training tends to be compartmentalized. How do we deal with that idea of it being one group gets this training, another group gets this? How do we bridge gaps and make, I hate to use such a buzzword, but the silo mentality here in VPS, that's the only buzzword I'll use, I promise. No, I can't promise that. They're all over. But how do we break that mold and get principals and the leadership in Boston Public Schools to recognize the facilitation that technology provides to help develop student literacies? How do we do that?
I think one of the things that OIT continues to do a good job of, but I think just continue to promote this, is the idea of like really refining the selection of resources that at each tier, whether it be a principal, a director of instruction, a network superintendent, all the way down to a teacher or even a parent might use or think about using to support, say, their child or their student at various, at whatever level they're at. And so I think that might be one approach, because there's so many different resources, and some of the resources are probably more akin to something the teacher would use as opposed to maybe a principal. But that'd be my initial take.
I think it's also, when we think about the resources, thinking about those resources that are kind of a little more general, that aren't so specific, content specific, or specific in one sort of area, that it's a little bit more general, and then as a facilitator of a PD, being able to say, okay, I'm using, I'll go back to my favorite, ThingLink at the moment. So I'm using ThingLink at this district level PD with principals, and I'm saying, okay, this is how you could bring it down, how you could use this with your teachers. If you have a document that you're presenting, you could then highlight sections that you want them to focus on, embed clips, video clips that you want to use, and then give another example of, okay, this is how your teachers could do this. So I think as we're planning PDs, kind of creating that variation, that tiering that information so that it's constantly communicated, that this could be used at every level, not just a level that is, only the 6th grade social studies teacher will be able to implement this tool. This is a tool that you could use across the board. So I think those kind of tools for creation are the types of tools that we want to make sure we're introducing to the district.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Brandon. I'll say this really quickly. I think that showing how the tools end up getting used with examples. One of the things we've really been trying to do lately is get examples from teachers that are coming from the classroom at multiple levels and in multiple disciplines. So if you're talking about Google Forms, don't just say, here's Google Forms. It's cool, it makes forms, but here's Google Forms. Here's a Google form that was used at a middle school level. Here's a Google form that a high school teacher used to get ready for Socrative seminar. Here's a Google form that elementary schools use to get information about their school population. And giving a lot of examples, and maybe even examples that are adaptable that teachers can grab right away and use, is another way to sort of break down what it looks like across levels. And that gets to the fine-grained detail. It's not as general as what you were saying, Natasha, but it does sort of give us a feel for what it could look like at multiple levels. And it's a general tool, but here's what it looks on a fine-grained level.
Yeah, the quick comment I was going to make was, Elizabeth, you kind of hit on it, but I think there are specific ways in which, let me back up and say, like, not all of the tools need to be instructionally focused. There are tools that would, I'm sure a principal would benefit from if it supported them in management and or supporting professional learning communities within their schools. And so take for something as simple as a Google form, I think it has different uses based on where it is potentially being implemented, and providing examples of how a tool like Google Forms could be used in various ways, I think is also kind of part of this larger idea we need to be considering.
As an example of that, Ed, if you want to show my screen real quick, one great example of exactly what you're talking about is we have Google Plus, and we're starting to open it up to whole schools. And as it gets opened up to whole schools, it's not opened up to students yet. So it's not instructionally relevant right this minute because teachers can't use it with their students. But what it is relevant for is use among teachers to develop professional learning networks, to share resources with one another. And so one thing you can do with Google Plus is create a community. These are the communities that I've joined. There are a number of Google Plus communities, but within a Google Plus community, and I'll click on our BPS digital learning community here. Within a community, you can share photos, links to relevant resources, or even Google Forms. I think I've shared some Google Documents and Google Forms in here. You can share videos from YouTube. You can create events. You can even poll people. And so this is a great tool for sort of managing resources at your school, for sharing out, for creating sort of a social media environment for your school that's more sort of management based and more sort of school community and communication based for the adults. But it creates a great space for doing that. And I think, when we think about these digital tools, we can think about exactly what you said, Brandon, using them for multiple purposes, not just in the classroom and instructionally, because teachers need to use these spaces as learners first, I think, a lot of the time, before they can necessarily use them in the classroom with students. I think it helps a lot to be engaging with them as a learner, and so this creates a space for that.
That sort of addresses what Brandon was saying about having a space for schools to share things, and sharing that Google Plus community that we created, Liz, brings up the issue. I wasn't really going to talk about it too much, but social media in our schools and with students' lives, and using social media as educators, folks. Let's put out some challenges out there. How can we use social media effectively? And many districts are coming up with social media policies for YouTube, Twitter, and Google Plus, among other things. So where do we go in terms of meeting the students where they are? We know that they're coming from a world that they're digitally connected. And as Natasha said, you talked about tools for creation, Natasha, and kids are blogging, kids are tweeting, kids are putting things up on Instagram, they're meshing photos and making new visual images. There's lots of mixing going on. So how do we use social media to sort of engage with other learners, as Liz said, with other educators, but also in the classroom to maintain that constant stream of communications and opportunities to access content in a way that is available to everybody?
I think part of it is just getting used to using it as a professional. So I must say I'm new to the Twitter world. I have just jumped on board this year, partly because of the guidance. It's the guidance of the director of the history department. Carrie Dunn is very into Twitter, so jumped on the bandwagon. But I think part of it is just playing around. I mean, I think I get more information and more updates quicker via Twitter than I would have ever had before. And just the thought of being able to share information that you find, something that you find new that you want to tell somebody that you may not be with at the moment, you can put it on your Twitter, and then you have people commenting back and forth and sharing, and you get that kind of immediate interaction with content that you're learning. Mm-hmm. I think that's exciting.
I would just say this. I think we are at a point in time where the paradigms of what the classroom environment are shifting dramatically. Meaning, I think with the advent of the internet, it became this beautiful moment where we could bring the world into the classroom, and we're at a point in time where we need to begin to think about where does the classroom stop? Meaning, like, how can we expand the classroom beyond the walls of the school? So I think, Ed, to one of the things that you said, talking about connecting, collaborating, communicating, I think in thinking about how we advance instruction and education, I think those three components are kind of get at how we can begin to think about using social media. And I think that extends to community-based organizations. I think that extends to other schools and linking schools together. And I think, one of the critical areas that I'd like to see it extend to is just parents. I think a lot of our students have parents who are on social media, and I think it could be a very powerful tool in almost connecting even conversations, parts of lessons that are taught within the walls of the school, and extending those almost as an invite to families. And so those are just some initial kind of big picture thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I love that Ed's bringing up the hot button issue of the day, whether or not to,
Yeah.
not whether or not anymore, but like how to engage conversations about social media in the classroom. And I think you guys have brought up some great things about collaboration and talking to parents and reaching outside the school and expanding the bounds of the school, but I think it's really important too in the classroom. I mean, I know we don't have social media opened up in Boston Public Schools, especially to students. We have a lot of it locked down, but that doesn't mean that conversations about what happens in social media and how to engage in social media can't take place in the classroom. And it also doesn't mean that you can't do social media type things in the classroom. So there's Fake Book, which is fake Facebook. And you can create fake book pages for your classroom, or you can create fake book accounts and engage with students in spaces like that that are sort of safe and locked down to your classroom. There's Today's Meet, which is basically Twitter, but it's closed down Twitter, so it's 140 characters. And we know we have teachers at the Horace Mann who have used this to teach students sort of some back and forth correspondence with in professional settings, and we've had teachers use it with ELL learners too. And also, at the very basic level, let's say you don't have computers in your classroom and you can't access these apps. I've seen teachers who create Twitter feeds and they post them on the wall, and they create a classroom space where it's like a paper Twitter feed on one of those big Post-it sticky note things. And they teach students the basics of Twitter and hashtags and things, and they create a classroom culture where it's okay for a kid to just get up right in the middle of a lesson and go tweet something. And kids can go back channel on the wall in the middle of a lesson. And yeah, it sounds like it might be a little crazy and disruptive, but that's the kind of culture these kids live in now, where they are at a concert and they're paying attention and they're listening, but they're also back channeling. And teaching them how that back channel works, how they can have a conversation going on about the content that's happening in class at that moment, and making that even a physical thing where you notice it and you see it happening and kids have to think about it and then maybe talk and reflect on it can be really powerful. And so just because you don't have the social media in the classroom doesn't mean it's not a conversation in the classroom, doesn't mean it can't be embedded into the culture of the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's important also when we think about the responsibility and the respect that we need to learn when we're communicating on social media. I mean, the classroom is a great space for that, to have those conversations of how do you what you're saying on social media is going to be communicated to everyone. So how do you do it respectfully, and how do you make sure that you are kind of following social norms in that sake? I think that's something that the more we teach kids that, the more it'll reduce the problems later.
Mm-hmm.
And Liz, to sort of jump on what you said about that fake Twitter feed in the classroom, it sounds messy. If I'm a teacher and I need to control my class and manage my class, it sounds like a kid is getting up and writing on the wall. I didn't ask him to. He didn't raise his hand to ask permission. That's a culture shift, and that's what Brandon said too. There's a whole paradigm shift of behavior in the classroom, and is noise okay? Is movement okay in the classroom? And collaborating in pods or in circles, that's a great shift. And are our teachers being prepared for that shift and for that role that they need in order to facilitate that multi-dynamic mode going on in their classroom? That's a great challenge. What do you think about that?
Your questions get harder as we go.
I'm challenging. Let me solve this. Brandon.
No. Ed, have you heard about the new Facebook?
The new Facebook.
The new Facebook?
Yeah. Not sure, Brandon.
I haven't either, but I think that's the world we're living in.
Tomorrow?
Yeah. I think the core of instruction and education, I think will likely still be there, but I think the more creative teachers can be, and we can be in supporting teachers to use all these tools, I think will only enhance the educational experience of students in classrooms. And so I think in the same way that teachers do the east, west, north, south? Do you agree, disagree? For example, you know, agree or disagree may start looking like hashtag this or hashtag that in the back. You know, I think we are, you know, have to be both adaptive and just open to thinking outside of what has been the traditional maybe educational experiences of students in our classrooms. So.
And I think it comes back to what Natasha said way when we first started talking about modeling. I mean, if teachers are going to do this in their classrooms, our PD needs to look like that. Teachers need to do this as learners. And so, you know, when I was learning how to be an English teacher, some of the most powerful things that I took back with me into my classroom were things where I was doing whatever it was in my pre-service education course or in my professional development experience. I was doing the thing that I was then going to go do with my students, and I was doing it as a student and as a learner. And so, you know, maybe our PDs need to be a little messier. Maybe they need to engage teachers with these tools. And you said something about playtime, Ed, and I think that's really important, that teachers need time to play, but not just mess around with a new technology tool, but to do so in a focused way, to have a task at hand, to have something that they're creating or building, and a little bit of guidance as to what it is they're going to go do. So it needs to be focused playtime. It needs to be something that has a goal and an outcome in mind. That in the same way we would have a goal for our students, we would have a learning outcome that guided whatever that they were going to do. We need to do the same things in our PD. We need to model those practices.
I would definitely agree. And I think the other thing that we need to realize, just coming out of the elementary classroom, is just because I like to call it organized chaos, it's not chaos. There's structures that as a teacher you're teaching your students, and someone coming in may not realize what's happening in the classroom, but each child knows exactly what they're able to do, what they're not able to do. And I think part of professional development is setting aside time to have those conversations. You know, how do you structure logistically allowing kids to do a Twitter feed via paper in the classroom? Okay, maybe they know they can get up X amount of times. They can do this, they can do that. And, you know, those kind of structural pieces make it more manageable in the classroom. And I think as facilitators for professional development, we have to keep that in mind of, A, we're going to model it, B, providing time for teachers to talk about it and talk about how they could implement it in the classroom. And really making sure that there's opportunity for that, but also the logistical piece. You know, you could do it this way. You don't have to, but this is one way I would recommend it.
Natasha, you mentioned something earlier about Twitter, and you're new to Twitter. And I'm not new to Twitter. It's been a few years, but I still consider Twitter, you know, Google Plus communities. I feel connected to other educators that I never would have imagined being connected with. And, you know, as teachers, we're hoarders. You know, we don't keep things in big file cabinets. We have the cloud, but I had file cabinets full of materials from National Geographic. I was a social studies teacher. I wanted to culminate. I wanted to cull everything and really save it for another use. And that's how I gained my own learning. And these days, I can go online and connect with other educators and get an amazing resource. I can check in with the Google guru every day for a new tip on learning how to use Google, or I can learn some amazing coding things that I never thought I would be able to learn. YouTube has been an amazing learning experience for specific functional tools that we want to use. So the PD has changed for us too, and as we're professional development facilitators, how do we start using social media and to sort of keep the conversations going? More often than not, we have professional development, and it's a one-stop thing, and we have 2 or 3 hours, maybe even 6 hours, and then it's done, and then another 6 weeks we have another session. So in terms of leadership and ongoing professional development, do you see that shift changing in BPS at all? Brandon, I know you're working with school leaders, and Natasha, you're working with teachers and school leaders. How is that shifting at all? Are we using any of those tools?
You
know, my immediate comment. Sorry, Natasha, were you going to say something?
No, go right ahead. I'm working on something that I can show you, so go right ahead.
My immediate thought was, you know, I think a lot of times in our professional development, we are not providing. So the question is specific to how are we using social media in to keep the conversation going, but it's not necessarily integrated into the professional development itself. So teachers or principals are not able to, for example, during the PD necessarily engage in the use of social media. So it's kind of an afterthought at the conclusion of the PD with the hopes that they carry forward kind of the conversations. I think part of using social media and why social media is so great is that I think it is related to the passions that individuals have for specific topics. And so if you can generate within that professional development, groups of teachers or groups of principals that have a specific individual interest in seeing a topic or further developing an idea, and really using the PD session to orient them around the social media, get them engaged and invested in a certain topic or project or idea, and then kind of releasing them almost to say, this is how you can continue to develop this, I think is one strategy we need to kind of continue to work on in our district, both in our design of PD and how we maybe try to follow up with individuals after the PD to see how things carry forward.
Natasha, before you jump in and show something, I just want to say amen to that. That is so key. If you want teachers to use the ongoing spaces, we've had this conversation about BPS Learns, about Google Sites that somebody creates, about using a social media space. You have to use it in the face-to-face workshop too. They have to see it and use it and engage with it when you got them there, and then the ongoing part will happen. But it's got to be embedded. It's got to be embedded in all pieces from the very beginning too, because otherwise it's not going to last.
So I've been slightly inspired. We're doing a full day professional development next week on notebooks. So I think we'll try to do some sort of hashtag that I think we'll do a little test drive, get excited about things. And it's funny because now at the end, I'm going to screen share something. Now at the end of every professional development PowerPoint presentation, the last slide that we actually put after the "Do you have any questions or comments?" is the "Stay in touch." Now we put it all the time in terms of stay in touch. These are our emails. This is our Twitter. That way, people know that we're available. We're happy to communicate, answer questions, and even just put information out there. And then in terms of the follow-up, I think I definitely agree that with professional development, we have to design it so that teachers have the opportunity to, learn something new, go out and try it, and then bring it back. So with the professional development that's happening next week, it's a full day session, 8-hour session, and then teachers are going back, they're going to implement the notebook structure, and then they have a follow-up for 2 hours where they're going to be actually posting. It's going to be a BPS Learns module where I'm going to ask them to post samples of their notebooks that they've created and have the conversation there. So then it's brought back around. It's not just we learn something and then that's it. Where do you go? It's creating that sense of community that continues on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as a challenge too, like that slide you just showed, Natasha, I love it. You've got your Twitter handles, and maybe if you had like a hashtag for the PD, you put the hashtag up there, and maybe that goes up at the beginning and at the end of your session, and people can, and you say, tweet during the session, have a back channel going, and maybe then you get people into that space a little bit more, even if only 1 or 2 people try it. Maybe if it works once, it works again the next time. And so making that an embedded part of the PD from the very get-go, from the start, from the first 5 minutes, makes a big difference. And having them work within the space like BPS Learns during the PD might make them go back later on. So.
Yes, I'm very excited to generate some sort of interesting hashtag now.
Well, I'm glad we're able to approach that hot button issue of social media, and now we have hashtags at our PD and maybe even in Google Plus. I would encourage people, if you don't have you both have the 3 of you have your Google Plus accounts open, but maybe it's time to create a Google Plus community of your own for your particular cohort of people that you work with. And as Natasha and you've all said today, is just modeling these things and putting them into our own practice with the adults that we work with is the first step in getting us to be able to do that with students, which is our ultimate goal. So we are approaching the end of our hour. I would love to continue, but I know that people have specific schedules. I feel very fortunate to have been part of this discussion, and thank you so much for being on this panel and discussing Common Core and technology integration, social media, and learning communities. There's always so much work to do, but there are some laughs here today, which tells us a lot of this work is fun. And working together with the adults and our colleagues is a good time, Brandon. I'm not kidding. It really is a good time. And I hope that we can continue to have fun while we're learning and providing solutions for Boston Public Schools. What are your final thoughts, folks? Anything
You're gonna plug next week's webinar, right? Before we go.
Say that again, Liz.
You're gonna plug next week's webinar, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, Liz, since you just brought it up, why don't you tell us about next week's webinar?
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about reinventing your practice next week. I brought up a few of the things we might talk about when I was talking today, but we're going to have a couple teachers on. We're going to talk about how you take things that you've been doing in the classroom for a long time and you reshape them and reimagine them and make them super cool and use new tools to do it. So if you know of any teachers who might be interested in watching that, we'll be on our DLT YouTube channel talking about that next week. This was super fun. I really enjoyed talking to Brandon and Natasha and you, Ed, about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll close out. I didn't get to share all the quotes I had prepared, so we'll end
give us one.
I'm going to give you, here we go, Albert Einstein. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. So when we think about technology integration, really wanting to make sure that we're learning how to think, how to do the create, the collaborate, the communicate aspects of it, and not simply go on and play games. It's a lot deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. I love that quote, Natasha. Thank you for sharing that.
I think that even this webinar is evidence of how far BPS has come in terms of supporting the development of, just in the use of technology throughout, not only at the district level, but even at the school level. So I just hope that this continues. I hope that as more individuals hear of this webinar series, we have, it sparks interest, it sparks participation, and really, I think gets at and cuts at some of the big questions that you asked today.
Yeah.
But no, I'm happy to have been a part of this. So.
Well, to that point, Brandon, in all seriousness, we're in OIIT, we're in the technology department. Liz and I are part of the digital learning team, but we don't want to be part of OIIT. We really don't.
Don't let our colleagues hear you say that.
Don't tell our colleagues we said that. We want to be part of we want to be part of your work. We want to be sort of the invisible hand in your work, to help you facilitate technology integration. It's not a separate tool that walks in and does something for you. It's something that you're just accompanied with, and that is something you reach into your own bag and have access to. So I hope that the use of this webinar and Google Plus on air, Brandon, that you're able to do that with some of your colleagues and your cohorts that you work with, and Natasha, the same with you. Maybe this is the next wave of professional development that you decide doing a webinar. It's another way of looking at webinars. So we're really happy to do this, and I see us as trying to really promote the integration of all of these things into a community of Boston Public School educators learning together.
Yeah, we love our department, but we help everybody else. We're part of collaboration. That's the whole point. It's everywhere,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Well, with that in mind, I really thank you for an enjoyable, informative, and perceptive broadcast on air. I'm going to say goodbye now and stop the broadcast. Thank you so much, Natasha Scott, for joining us, Brandon Slaughter from the Academics Department, Liz Holman, a Digital Learning Specialist here in Boston. Thank you so much, folks, and I'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.